Why Magneto deserves a solo film. You may know him as the man who bends metal, the man who dons an oval-shaped weird mask that makes him look like a bald person, or even more, that really old grandpa you saw in the first X-Men trilogy. Either way, if you're an X-Men fan, you may know that some characters deserve their own solo films, and sometimes lack the screen time they needed in the original movies. Some examples would be Quicksilver, Mystique, and Nightcrawler, but the man to hold the #1 spot for that should be Magneto. So why does this old man need his own solo film? Let's find out. But before moving, we need to give the not-so-comic geeks a fresh look on the backstory of this mutant. If we're strictly talking about the X-Men movie universe Magneto, he was born to a German Jewish family under the name of Eric Lenscher. Eric was later recruited by Sebastian Shaw, who forced him to show his mutant powers by murdering his mother in front of him. I know, not the best way to introduce yourself to a future supervillain, but those were dark times with dark people, or mutants in this case. We need to make a point here before we move on. Sure, a lot of mutants had their own bad childhood, but Eric was a person who suffered the worst. The murder of his mother was a core incident which resulted in his motivations. If Shaw hadn't murdered his mother, he wouldn't have had such a pessimistic outlook on the world. Sure, he might have still fought for the mutants, but he may have had the tendency to agree with his friend Charles's pacifist approach. No need to dwell on the bad childhood, we're skipping to the part where he meets his best friend and his sworn enemy, Charles Xavier. He meets Xavier and his company of mutants, Raven and Moira that is, on his hunt for Shaw. Then the movie pulls out the regular cliche. Hey, both of them are in for the same goal, so why not make them friends? But in franchises like X-Men, friendships don't last long, and soon the two clash against their ideals on how to reform society against humans. Charles holds a more pacifistic approach, but Magneto on the other hand holds a more utilitarian approach to the matter. No, we're not going to spoil any more plot synopsis for the rest of the movies. We just needed to give you an overview of his character before getting onto the point. So why does Magneto deserve a solo film of his own? To have a character-centered film, that character should have a multifaceted personality. Just a simple old personality won't do. The character should have goals that go beyond just a few words. World domination, human eradication. These are the goals of comic book villains, but movie writers know how to deepen the arcs of these characters and create villains with human traits. And Magneto is a character whose surface was only touched in the X-Men movies. Now this statement may seem confusing, but let me explain. Just as I mentioned before, when a villain is exported from a comic book to a movie script, his character gets some massive development, and if his character has had no story relevant to establish his arc in the movie or movie series, the writers craft out their own stories so the character might become more relatable in the movie. Captain America was a shield-swinging maniac before he was given a backstory, and a character like Human Torch was all about torching stuff before he was given his own storyline. So let's take Magneto's ambition, to create a better world for the mutants. He's seen the harm humans did to the mutants and wanted to save them. He's actually the figure of a savior, but with his own flaws. Even though his end goal is to save mutants, what fuels this is the death of his mother. And even though he killed his mother's murderer, the impact of his death still lingers within him. His idea of saving people is actually his motivation of revenge and his tainted childhood veiled in disguise. But this is rarely touched upon in the movies. In the first movie trilogy, Magneto is most of the time seen as the villain of the series, and this hides the fact that ultimately he's working for a better future for the mutants. The only difference between him and Charles is that the two of them choose completely different paths to reach their goal. But just because Magneto chooses a wrong path doesn't mean that he's a villain. The best way to prove this to an audience is to justify his actions more. Sure, there were some random quotes here and there to justify his actions in the movie, but the movies didn't give much time to reveal more of his emotions and his thought process. But in truth, Eric, aka Magneto, actually loved humans and sometimes even sees revenge as a flaw. He's had two relationships with women, one with Miss Maximoff, which resulted in the birth of his son Pietro, aka Quicksilver, and his second relationship with his wife Magda. Both of them are women he truly loved, which means he doesn't hate humans on a fundamental level, but simply sees humans as his enemy just because of the actions some people had done to him. So let's see how this can be solved in a solo movie, shall we? In a solo movie, there's only one protagonist. For example, in Wolverine, the main character is Wolverine, but in the X-Men franchise, he's just a main character of a bigger cast. It's like trying to find breathing room in a room full of people. Even though Wolverine got his own character arc in the movie, his solo movie managed to expand that character and also show us more of his backstory. This could be the same case for Magneto. Sure, you might say the X-Men First Class movie gave us plenty of screen time, but Magneto has plenty of comic book arcs that the filmmakers can adapt. For example, the Mutant Genesis arc in X-Men showed what evil the man under the metal mask can commit, and arcs like the Trial of Magneto showed Magneto being a good guy, which in my opinion is similar to Thanos having a tea party with the Avengers. Also, he's the guy who can beat off Wolverine with a shrug. So what more do you need to ask? Seriously, his fighting talent is underestimated in the series. Most of the time you see him standing and looking cool, but we need a fight between Magneto that can really show his fighting potential. Imagine the fight between Wolverine and Deadpool at the end of the Solo movie. Even though Deadpool wasn't in his best shape, this was a fight that had both a good climax and something that showed the strength of Wolverine. This is the sort of thing we need in a Magneto Solo movie. Something that can give Michael Fassbender some serious sweat on set. Also, every hero and villain has his philosophies and theories. Thanos wants to snap half of the world into extinction, Charles wants to create peace between humans and mutants, and as we mentioned in the beginning, Magneto's stubborn philosophy is to make mutants the dominating species in the world. He only cares about the end cause and doesn't care what happens in between. His stubbornness, his iron will, and his ideals can make him do anything, and whether it's good or bad, that's some thinking after the deed is done. These are some things you can reveal on a much deeper level in a solo movie, rather than a movie where he's just one of the main characters. Another reason to give Magneto a solo movie is his relationships with the characters. This is also another factor that's touched very less in the movies. Magneto and Mystique had a much stronger bond, and the only time the movie decides to put some thought into this is during the X-Men First Class movie. But this relationship can be further discussed if Magneto gets a solo movie. Both Mystique and Magneto are people who were insulted because of being mutants. They both have a rough past chasing after them, and at times, both of them have the same ideals. Magneto was the first person who acknowledged Mystique for her original mutant appearance, and the only person who respected her abilities. This is what creates a special bond within them, and in some cases, even manages to drag him out from the path when he wants to become a villain. So as you can see, there's much more to this metal-bending mutant than just being the villain. Magneto is a complex character, and what he needs is a solo movie that can shine the spotlight on that complexity and truly acknowledge him as one of the greatest characters in the X-Men series. That's it for today, mutant fans. There are so many reasons as to why he deserves a solo film. Also, we're pretty sure that Michael Fassbender would do complete justice to this role, as he always does. So let's just make enough noise about a Magneto movie that the studio is compelled to give us one. Comment below about what you think about this and whether you'd be interested in watching a solo Magneto movie. And if you think any other character deserves a solo movie, then comment below and I might make a video about it.